What's up, everybody? I hope y'all are having a wonderful day. I'm Anthony. On today's video, I wanted to go with y'all some of the results from my great grain experiment of 2022. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so the reason I'm doing this video is because I want to make a good exclamation point for the video I started back in January talking about the key to surviving a long-term event. Now, in that video, I talked about one of the things that you absolutely need to consider is being able to grow, like produce, store, and use grain crops, because everybody knows that grain crops were the reasons why certain civilizations were able to outcompete other hunter-gatherers, because they were able to store excess for the following season. So people like the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Romans, the Egyptians, Chinese, they were all able to use grains to their advantage to be able to build absolute empires. So that's why I wanted to go ahead and think about what grains I could grow in my area that could give me the same advantage. So I wanted to give myself a fair shot to see if I could grow any different kinds of grains than I had been normally using or growing previously to this year. Now, all I had grown, if you remember that video, all I had grown was really beans and corn. Now, they're great grain crops. They're absolutely amazing, but there are other things out there that you could potentially grow off season that would be beneficial to a certain area, especially when it comes down to trade, because if everybody else is growing this kind of stuff, then you could absolutely trade for almost anything you want to. So I wanted to go ahead and expand my repertoire. So what I did was I planted things like wheat, buckwheat, quinoa, millet, peanuts, all this stuff, and I wanted to show you guys what my results were. First and foremost, my absolute favorite was wheat. This is how much wheat I was able to get off of the entire bed I planted. Now, I know that doesn't seem like a lot, but when I only started with 150 seeds and I end up with this, that's actually a pretty good result. So this will encourage me, especially the things that I learned. I did a whole video on them. I'll put it down here down in the description. Please go check it out. But I will take everything I've learned in growing wheat and try again this next coming year, because I want to make sure that I can succeed and know that some of the things that I learned and the timing that I learned wasn't just a fluke. So I want to try a different kind, a soft red variety this time instead of a hard red, and I want to see if I can really make this something I can grow every single year, because I really like wheat. I love baking my own bread, and being able to grow your own is just so rewarding. Why wouldn't you try? So wheat definitely is my number one. I absolutely am going to definitely try this again. Okay, so the next one was buckwheat. Now, buckwheat is one of those things that not a lot of people know about nowadays, but way back when, prior to 1960, when all the agricultural companies started to experiment with chemical fertilizers, everybody grew buckwheat as a cover crop or as a way to bring in potassium to the soil. Because the good thing about, buckwheat, any kind of cover crop, is it's going to give nutrients to that soil. So that's why people would plant buckwheat. And the byproduct was you're able to eat the grain. Now, it's not an actual true cereal grain. It is a pseudo cereal. But it still is one of those things that you absolutely have to grow if you would like a full nutritional profile from one source. So I want to go ahead and give it a shot. This is how it turned out. Now, one thing I didn't expect when I was growing this buckwheat is exactly how fast they were going to grow. This was in the first 7 weeks, and I got this. It was extremely plentiful in the flowering department. There were so many flowers, the pollinators loved it. I only grew this in a 4x3 area, so it's not like I had a lot of space. The good thing about it is I can see why it's used as a cover crop, because it absolutely shaded out all the weeds. Once you have the flowers, go and bloom for about 2 months, then you start developing the seed head. They look like that. As you can see right next to my thumb, it's a little green seed pod. They start to form at the base of each flower cluster. Sometimes you'll get one, sometimes you'll get three, but for the most part I got 1 or 2. Then when they start to dry out and turn brown like that, that's how you know you're about ready. Some of them you can squeeze because there's no seed pod in them and they'll collapse. Other ones you can pick right off and they are firm. When they're firm, that's how you know there's a seed in there and you're good to go. You can pick them like this or wait till the whole seed head dies off, all the flowers die, and pick them and they look just like that. Now, unfortunately, I ran into a big problem when it came to buckwheat that I didn't consider, and that's heat, all right? Buckwheat does not really like over 90 degrees. It loved the springtime. It was growing fantastic when it was between 70 and 80 degrees. I'm talking about like every day I was noticing a difference in size. But once it hit about 90, we went into slow-mo mode, and unfortunately, the flowering season on this kind that I grew, the Tucane Ruby, was so long, I wasn't able to harvest the grain I thought I was going to be able to get, because that flowering stage just took 2 months. It took, way too long for my area. So because in June here, it gets about 90 and stays 90s until end of August, there isn't really a good way to say, hey, yeah, you can get grain from this. So when I talked to some of the old timers in my area, they said they used to grow buckwheat all the time back in the 50s, but they would have to grow the short style, like the common buckwheat, that would go to seed quicker than what I grew. And if they didn't get to that point, if it got too hot and they weren't, they're still flowering, they would just till them under for organic matter. So because they are a very good cover crop and they do bring a lot of organic matter to the soil. So this is all I was able to harvest from it. I planted 75 seeds and I probably got maybe 75 seeds back out of it. So I would call this an absolute fail, but it did teach me a very valuable lesson. That being, hey, if you want to build a good cover crop to shade out all the weeds, plant buckwheat, absolutely. If you want to bring in pollinators, plant buckwheat. But if you're looking for a grain, this ain't it. So the next one I experimented with was millet. Millet is one of those grain crops that a lot of people don't know about, but they're used heavily in like bird seed, or it's very good for livestock. So I wanted to grow millet because there are countries that still eat it. Happens a lot in Europe, people still eat millet. A lot of times in the United States you don't see people eating it anymore, but we use it for livestock fodder. I wanted to grow it to see if I could grow feed for my chickens, and ultimately I was successful. That is what this one looks like. It's called German foxtail millet. Looks like a foxtail. And a little hint, if you want to get these seeds out of here, you see how small they are? If you want to get those out of here, you use a comb, a fine brushed comb, like one for my mustache, and you comb them out. Now there are still heads drying in the garden, so I'm not really too concerned about it. It only gave me this much from one head, all right? It's not a lot, but considering there was only one of them, which gave me about, I don't know, about 80, 90 per head, I'd say that's an absolute win. So if you would like to grow something in a climate that's hot like mine, that gives you a really big bang for your buck, think about millet. I love this plant because it was really, really slow in April, May, but as soon as it hit that 85-degree mark and my buckwheat started to die, this absolutely took off. I mean, like, the heat didn't even seem to bother it. I was actually kind of curious if I needed to water it as often as I was watering everything else, because it didn't show any sign of like being thirsty. I still gave it a regular watering just so it could make the seeds inside, and sure enough it did. The one problem I did run across was birds. I'm sure if you grow this by the quarter acre, half acre, whatever, then birds will never ever be able to get all of it. But yeah. If you're looking for something to give to your livestock, if you have chickens and you want to grow your own feed, I would absolutely take a look at some millet, because you definitely get a lot for what you plant. Okay, so the next one that I tried was soybeans. All right, I've never tried growing soybeans before, mainly because I really don't eat them. But there is soybean meal in everything. Soybeans are a good way to get oil, and soybeans are obviously the big source of edamame if you like eating edamame. Now, my child loves eating edamame, so I was like, okay, well, I'll grow some soybeans for her, see what kind of happens. And I just let them dry on the plant. I didn't even go for the edamame stage. I just let them dry on the plant. And this is what I got. Now, I know you're thinking, that's not a lot. But I only planted 12. I only had 12 soybean plants. And from 12 soybean plants, I was able to get 91 seeds out of here. So that's about a 7.5 times multiple. So if I were to plant 100, I would get 750 if we go 7.5 times. So that's really not bad for what you do. The only problem I ran into with soybeans was I have a lot of gripeweed around here, and if I didn't keep the area that I had planted clean, then the gripeweed grew all around it, and it was choking out the sunlight from getting to the soybeans. So that was one of my biggest issues, and I understand why they like to douse these fields in Roundup, so they can try to get rid of all this weed pressure, because they don't grow very high. I think the tallest one was like 20 inches, so weed pressure is a big deal. But one of my favorite factors was all I had to do was plant this and just wait like 3 months and then go harvest it. That's it. I didn't have to do anything else. As long as I kept it weeded so the sunlight could get to the plant, I was good to go. Didn't have to stake anything, didn't have to put a trellis, nothing. All I do is plant and harvest. So if you are going to be doing soybeans, I'm probably going to do this again because it was very, very easy. I'm going to plant soybeans one more time, but I want to do it in an area where my corn was, because soybeans are a legume. They actually improve the soil. All the bacteria in the roots help to bring down nitrogen from the air and fix the soil. So that's obviously why they do it in the corn-soybean swap. I'm going to do the same thing to see if it works. And the final grain that I tried was peanuts. Now, peanuts were one of those things where when I tried to put them down, I put them down really, really early. I'm talking about like end of March, right when the soil temperature was still below 65 degrees. And I got a very bad germination rate. But one thing I did was I just kept on planting to see when it would actually grow. And right around mid-April, when the soil temp hit about 70 degrees, I was good to go. Everything worked out great. Everything was germinating, and I got a good looking plant. However, I didn't expect what the plant was going to look like because I've never grown peanuts before. I didn't expect that style, so I almost had mistaken it for a weed, when in reality it was just the peanuts. So make sure you know what they look like. They look like this. But the one thing about peanuts that I got to make sure I represent with this video, I haven't even harvested them yet. I put these things down in early April, like I'd say beginning of April, and it's end of August and they're still in the ground. Half of that reason is because, yeah, they were shaded by my pumpkins. They didn't grow very well, but they just have such a long growing season. I completely understand why they don't grow these above the Mason-Dixon line. You just don't have a long enough season. I'm talking about 100 and something days these things have been on the ground. So let me go ahead and show you what they look like now. This right here is one peanut plant. This whole thing. So make sure if you plant them, you give them enough space to get this big. This is probably about 2 by 2 or 2 foot by 2 foot. It's extremely big. But what they do is they send out these little flowers right here. See those little flowers? They're called pestils, and they put them into the ground, and that's where your peanuts come from. So everything's underground is what's making the peanuts. Now I'm not going to dig it up yet because it's not ready, but when I do, I'll definitely make sure I put a video on it so you can see exactly what it is. See, you got one right there, down into the ground. So I'm curious to know how much I'm going to get from this plant because it was only one peanut, but it's an extremely big plant. It's been very easy to grow. I haven't sprayed it, haven't really done anything. Yeah, you got some, looks like you got a little bit of fungal issues there, but these leaves right here are good. So, but I'm very impressed by how they handled the heat. Didn't seem to bother them whatsoever. Just gave them regular water, and that's where we're at right now. Alright, so there you have it. That is the new stuff that I tried for 2022. I still did pole beans, cowpeas, and sweet corn that I normally do. So I can't really say, hey, I tried it for the first time because I've already done it before. And I always get good yields with those, so they're very good for my climate. But when it comes down to what I'm going to try again, I will absolutely try wheat one more time. I'm going to try soft red wheat this time because I think it will work better for my climate. I will not do buckwheat again for a grain. I will definitely do buckwheat for organic matter and a cover crop because it absolutely shaded out everything and it definitely builds the soil quality fantastically. I will absolutely grow millet again because millet was very good for the chickens. Chickens absolutely loved it. If you have wild bird feeders, they also eat millet because the birds were all over that stuff. And finally, I will absolutely grow soybeans again. I'm just going to move it around as a nitrogen fixer. Will I grow soybeans all the time? I don't know because cowpeas and pole beans do the same thing. I'm not really that big a fan of eating soybeans, but I definitely eat cowpeas, so I might just use those more often. But soybeans were so easy. All you had to do was plant it and then come back and harvest. So aside from weeding, they didn't really see a problem with it. But that's my experience so far. I'm considering growing a hulless variety of oats this winter time. Let me know if I should do that. I don't know if I'm going to do it, but I definitely want to try wheat one more time. I do have the space to try oats, but like I said, I don't know if I want to try it this year. I might wait for next, who knows. But hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do me a humongous favor and give me a thumbs up. Totally helps me out and I would very much appreciate it. Subscribe and I'll catch y'all later, okay?